We never found product market fit with the same day delivery company, but one of those customers was having trouble measuring gifting. They were doing a ton of gifting. Nothing was showing up in Google Analytics or using promo codes. Classic startup stories suggested that they go at a survey, no easy way to do it. And that's when Fairing was born. Understanding of this number, but it's probably around 100 million in revenue, where there is such bottoms up tracking of ad spend because cash is not as free flowing, most likely from a margin perspective, just from the economies of scale.
You are listening to Full Funnel.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Full Funnel podcast. I'm Rohit, your resident marketing nerd and your guide to AI-first marketing strategies. Today we're talking about the black hole in marketing attribution, basically all of the conversions that conventional attribution pixels will never see. My guest is Matt Bahr, the co-founder of Fairing. If you have bought something from a D2C brand recently and basically answered that little pop-up that said, "How did you hear about us?" chances are Matt's platform captured that answer. Fairing processes tens of millions of these answers in the form of post-purchase survey responses, cleans all of that data with AI, and then surfaces that discovery channels that most marketers would have never spotted in their ad platform dashboards. Matt, awesome to have you here. Quick introduction before we get started. Tell us a bit about your background and what got you here to this point today.
Yeah. Super excited to be here. Thanks for having me on. Also very excited to learn that our offices are only 4 blocks from each other. So
Indeed.
hopefully we'll see you soon in person. But yeah,
Definitely.
I've been in the e-commerce growth space since 2010. Started my career as a merchant on the e-commerce side, had a small consultancy, helped start a brand here in New York back in 2013 now. So definitely dating myself. And left that company in 2016. Funny enough to start a company in the same day delivery space. I was managing paid media and logistics at the previous company. We never found product market fit with the same day delivery company, but one of those customers was having trouble measuring gifting. They were doing a ton of gifting. Nothing was showing up in Google Analytics or using promo codes. Classic startup stories suggested that they go at a survey, no easy way to do it. And that's when Fairing was born.
Amazing. You're one of the pioneers in the space, especially in the e-com space.
I'd say, post-purchase surveys were definitely first to market here, but also iOS 14 definitely really sealed the deal, which we might get into in a bit, as far as this being a tried and true methodology as tracking got more difficult.
Indeed. I saw that you called pixel-only attribution or tracking attribution the e-commerce version of the Emperor's New Clothes. Yeah. When did that first occur to you? What was that moment? Can you share that situation, which kind of proved that essentially these tracking methods alone was costing the brands, their budget essentially?
Yeah, the first realization of this was back pre-founding Fairing. We used to be called Enquire, if anyone's heard of that. But it really came down to influencer as a channel was really starting to scale back in probably 2015 to 2016.
That's right.
And the example I gave before was the first foray into this. We built Fairing very much as a side project. We did not think that this whole kind of measurement methodology around kind of human in the loop data was going to become a thing, but it was really channel specific. And we're kind of like that today. If I talk to a brand who's just advertising on Meta and Google Ads, unless they have really high word of mouth they're trying to get some signal on, I'm like, Fairing's probably not the best tool for you, but these harder to measure channels is where we really show our value and flex. So as far as it becoming a thing, definitely the catalyst for us even building Fairing was very much to help understand influencer gifting was the real first thing. I don't think the size of the problem was even that large. I often think, would we have got to where we are today, which is a much better model around measurement with incrementality as kind of at the core, if iOS 14 by Apple didn't kind of push us forward a few years into that space.
That's right.
It's kind of a give and take. If you talk to any advanced marketing team, like the team at Booking.com, holdouts, and it's been part of their playbook for forever. So it's really exciting to see this come to the more kind of mid-tier merchant or brand. But that was really, it all started with influencer. And now we're kind of at a place where Fairing provides a ton of value, and we probably provide the least amount of value for Meta, to be honest. All the other social channels and gifting and TV, et cetera, we provide some really good signal.
Interesting. And can you probably walk us through how did this all these now answers are now kind of filling the gaps, right? Or what decisions can they now power?
Yeah. Yeah. So the best example is when you unsilo the how did you hear about us or post-purchase survey data is kind of the first step in being able to action on it. Because what you're trying to understand is you're trying to get as close to the truth as possible when it comes to what drove a conversion. So the first step in being able to action on this is, okay, what am I used to looking at? And if this was like, let's say Google Analytics or pre-GA4, I think everyone was in Universal Analytics at least once a day. I think that's definitely dropped pretty aggressively since. But the first step is like joining that human kind of attribution survey data with that click data to try to understand, okay, what is actually happening? Right. So when you're actioning on it, just looking at the survey data initially is certainly helpful. But when you compare it to maybe what you were looking at, maybe on the MTA side, or maybe not even multi-touch, but just last click, you start to build a much clearer understanding of what that path to purchase actually looks like. And it's funny, we still work with brands who have they're still using last click. And I don't know if that's due to a CFO who's just, that's how they've always done it. Yeah. But it's usually like a layup for us when we're like, here's your last click. It's going to be a high degree of Google and direct and some email, maybe SMS now. And now we're going to show you, oh, that like audio campaign you ran or that CTV campaign you ran is actually driving revenue, and your customers are very aware of that as the channel. That's probably the first step into like, if you're thinking about implementing one of these, it's the compare and contrast that allows you to build a better foundation.
Yeah. I think whenever we see folks still using last click, it's always this case of whatever's easy, right? That's like the easiest way to explain something to a CFO. And then the CFO is also incentivizing the marketer to drive those numbers up, the last click ROAS number, right? And nobody wants to touch anything. Everyone's very scared to kind of change their methodology and disrupt, ruffle the feathers, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Especially for brands who are, I don't know if I have an understanding of this number, but it's probably around 100 million in revenue where there is such like bottoms up tracking of ad spend, because like cash is not as free flowing most likely from a margin perspective, just from the economies of scale, where these things come down to, like, to your point, the like least common denominator, just like a more Occam's razor approach of like, let's not last click. It's easy. And there's a bunch of huge holes in there, as we know, but at least it makes sense for maybe the why a decision like that could be made.
Yeah, let's probably jump in a bit about, for those who want to understand a little bit more about the process itself. So essentially crafting this how did you hear about a survey, for example, might sound very simple, but I think for those who are familiar with surveys, I think the wording is everything. And, the choices that you make in the question structures, multiple choice or not, or any kind of follow-up logic. How do you ensure this consistently kind of delivers the signal you want to hear instead of noise?
Yeah, that is arguably our role at Fairing, is to help you get to those right answers. So whether it's testing question wording or us using our sample size to get a better understanding of, hey, what is actually the best way to add LLM to your survey? Like that's something we recently did. So that's really where a lot of the value that we provide is looking across our whole customer base, either running experiments or just looking at, honestly, other response data. One thing people don't think about is an open-ended how did you hear about us is probably going to have the highest accurate data on the per customer level. You're going to get a very low response rate, which means the extrapolation has a ton of error in it. So we don't recommend it, but it's a really good way to understand how those consumers are identifying those channels. So a good example is like for AppLovin, when brands started advertising with AppLovin, we were, for a few of them, we were like, actually don't add it to your attribution survey, like roll it out, because there's going to be some, this is why we randomize the responses. There's going to be some people clicking on it no matter what. But if you don't add it and people are writing it in, you're going to get a stronger signal, albeit not the whole sample of it working or not. So there's a lot. These are just kind of small examples of some of the things that we work with our customers for, of like how to actually orchestrate these things. The last thing I'll end with is we're starting to do more stuff in like the mobile space and some new verticals kind of beyond Shopify. And what we keep hearing is these markets, like, how often do you utilize the attribution survey data? And we asked on a scale and it was like an 8.5. And then we asked another question. It was like, well, how much do you trust it? And it was much, much, much lower. And it was really just because, to your point, people think about these as just a form or a survey, when to do these right, there's definitely a lot of like statistical rigor and kind of methodology involved to actually get really good output. So that's kind of the path that we're on from a company perspective, is how do we inject science into this methodology? And I know you mentioned like pixels versus people. Like our view, like our North Star is like, can we like get to the fidelity of a pixel firing from a more deterministic perspective? So we're trying to understand, like we're trying to read people's brains. Like what was the reason that you did this is really the question we're asking. Yeah. So we can use some really cool science to understand like the reliability of that data or the accuracy of that data. And that's kind of the path that we're on in going from simple form to a reliable data point.
Amazing. I think LLMs have definitely kind of like supercharged this whole effort, right? Because the way I see it, I'm always very curious about folks that have put like, multiple choice and, you kind of can't remember exactly which short form video you saw. It might be like TikTok or Reels, but when you ask them to type it in, for example, you might get a more accurate read maybe, right? And so that whole balance of depth and quality, I guess.
It is, the recall is definitely like a bias when we're capturing this data.
Yeah.
Our argument and all the analysis that we've done is when we're asking a question like, how did you hear about X? The first channel might actually not have had really any implication in that path to purchase. Like maybe they did see a TV ad, but it totally lapsed.
Yeah.
But the ad on TikTok is actually what like resonated and drove. And that's why they're answering it in that question. So if we think about where you want to allocate your budget towards, it's like more TikTok. Like it is the channel that actually resonated with that user is where you want to think about. So we've done a lot on that. And like the recall aspect, if your path to purchase is like multiple years, it's highly considered, then like we'd want to word the question differently than how did you hear it? It's more of like what led you to Casper mattress today, for example. But for the most part, that's kind of what we see in the output of trying to understand recall and like what was the most important channel. It's like there's a lot of ways that marketers, I think, as marketers, we would love to ask this question, but it needs to be in the way that the majority of the population can understand and answer.
Interesting. So with regards to the LLM, again, coming back to that, like essentially you're kind of using it, Faring is using it to kind of auto-classify some of these responses, right? Anything open-ended. Can you explain a little bit about how that works? Like how do you tidy it up and put it into like an actionable insight?
Yeah, so we're using a series of things. So our kind of ML-based reclass is not live yet. We kind of do this one-off for customers. We do have an AI weekly summary email that is live. We actually haven't announced this yet, but it is enabled for all Faring customers. Where what we're doing with that product is we're running about 50 different queries across your Faring data set, devices, promo code usage, response data. And then we're running that through a series of prompts that are trained like marketers to give our customers a summary. So that's a weekly summary to help you understand trends, and it's written in a way that's easily to digest for the marketer. The auto reclassification, what we've determined, and we've been working on this for about a year, is every customer has a different representation of a channel. So sometimes, like if we think about simulcast, which is podcasts going on YouTube, some marketers might actually want to label this as YouTube because that's like how they think about it in their org. Some might want to label it as podcasts. So what we launched earlier this year is like a manual way to move these data points around. Our customers have done this manually. It's like, I don't even want to admit it, but it's over 1 million times at this point that someone's like reclassified data. But what that's starting to give us is enough to be able to train every brand to have their own model that is a representation of how they think about channels. So that's kind of as we're approaching it. The end state will most likely be a combination of an LLM, something that's more deterministic, and just a basic matching algorithm on like a series of things that already been reclassified. But it's a series of both. We tried to go full LLM and just realized that the space is too large when we think about like podcast names and all these things.
That's right.
So a lot more to come on that, but the data reclassification, like as you know, like with NLP, it's like NLP works beautifully if you have a whole paragraph because there's so much context. But if somebody just writes like JRE, like it's much better probably just to match that to what it is than to use an LLM.
That's right. Amazing. If anyone can do it, I guess you guys have it because you got enough historical data to kind of learn how people are responding and stuff like that, right? Amazing training data set, I guess. So can you perhaps share some case studies if possible? The classic case of, hey, the brand thought that paid search was essentially winning everything and getting them all the sales, but surveys essentially said, hey, it was a podcast or Reddit. What is that big difference and how big is this revenue that is hidden in this blind spot? Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the better examples is a backpack company based here in New York who a few years ago, it's probably in like 2022, was investing a ton in TikTok as a channel. mainly from like owned and earned media, not necessarily paid just yet. If they looked at their more like MTA type style tracking, like it was as if they were doing literally nothing. I mean, it was like all this investment, all this ad creation was not working. They came to us or got introed to us because to try to help solve this problem. And it like became very quickly apparent that TikTok was like their number 2 source of traffic. So it's just like this beautiful example for us in the sense of like, yeah, like not everything is going to be able to track in a very linear click-based fashion, but if you just ask your customers, like these things will start to float to the top and you'll know how to reallocate that spend. Fast forward, I don't know if they're still doing it, but like about a year after that, they totally shut off Meta and they were 100% on TikTok as their core like growth channel. And like 75% of that, I think, was all like influencer typed owned and earned media. And they like, we were their source of truth for their media allocation. This is like a $20 million brand. This isn't a massive brand, and then their survey data was kind of guiding how they were thinking about media allocation. And they were just trying to match like those two things.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's a super powerful signal, really figuring out where are all your incremental customers, right? Whether they're on YouTube or TikTok. I think people kind of get held up in oversaturating the spend on Meta and then getting stuck there in this, what you call the doom loop, right?
The hardest thing to get out of. Yeah. And just understanding, we're still working on our point of view around this, but understanding how different channels interact with each other. A good example is like connected TV can make your Meta performance better if we're looking at Meta's dashboard.
That's right.
So the one thing that is positive, I think, with all of this what's old is new, when we think about like MMM and the incrementality is like the core is it is providing a lot of like scientific rigor, and people are starting to at least appreciate how complicated measurement is. When I think in like 2015, it was just like put money into Facebook and get money out. And it wasn't necessarily like the MMMs, I don't know, like Newstar, like public companies who I think their minimum contract's probably $1 million a year were like the only ones actually doing this.
Absolutely.
So it's like, we're in a place where you guys can come out and like solve massive problems for businesses with like a methodology that like historically was only like used for public companies, let's say.
Indeed. I mean, it's impossible to get anything perfect in measurement, as you probably know. My head of product says we are essentially using math and science to predict human behavior, which is near impossible, right? With the rate of change of whatever that's happening out there and how people perceive brands and for every single category out there. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
But the biggest question, I guess, is once they have all of this data, we always also preach at LifeSide that, you want to speak the language of business, right? Because marketers speak marketing language, finance teams speak the finance language, and that never plays well, right? And so, but the language of business is common, right? And self-reported data, I guess, or attribution essentially can sometimes feel a bit, anecdotal to some finance folks. What framework do you use to kind of help your marketers or the teams that you work with kind of blend the survey insights with the financial data so that the CFOs are like happy?
Yeah, the first, like the core of this here is de-siloing it. Obviously, it is. So if we think about geo holdouts, we think about MMM, like top-down approaches to measurement. Survey data is a bottoms-up approach. Like we are extrapolating in the sense we're adding synthetic data into the gaps based on like there's non-responders. There's a way to do it that's actually quite accurate. We're doing that, but if we think about click data, which like is non-linear, like there's no clicks on TV, there's no clicks on audio, there's no clicks on influencer, maybe if there's a link tree involved. So we don't want to necessarily be joining, let's say, an MTA, like a click-based approach with these top-down. But if we think about what's replacing MTA, in our view, it is like the actual human in the loop. It is the survey data that is going to be more accurate at the top of the funnel. We're not trying to optimize for the bottom of the funnel. You can arguably, like there's still a world for last click, not from a pure model perspective, but like from a branded search perspective. Let's call it. You shouldn't be making budget allocations there, but at least for knowing, hey, clicked on an ad and made a conversion. Right, so that's our first step, is kind of de-siloing these things. So understanding and comparing, let's say, like incrementality tests, every time that we've done them with a customer, funny enough, the output of those are very similar to the survey data, like very. So what you're trying to do is kind of increase your confidence steps with every methodology. And let's say you're investing into a channel that isn't really happening or isn't showing up well, or let's say you can't do a geo holdout. Like you can't do a geo holdout with audio unless it's programmatic.
Exactly.
So that's really the kind of multi-pronged approach that I know you guys take. That is like what we pitch, which is like, how do we de-silo the different methodologies to fill gaps?
Yeah.
And it's going to be different on a per channel basis. And then you need to kind of throw that umbrella on top of it, which is arguably where MMM does a good job, into like, okay, how are these things interacting with each other? The more sophisticated fairing customers today are using survey data as a prior in their MMM and running those sets of analysis. If there's high consideration windows, like holdouts provided, can get really noisy. If you have to do a holdout for a very long period, survey data can help fill those gaps. Amazing. It's very kind of multi-pronged in the way of how do you like action and bring this data in. What we do in fairing, to just end here, is, again, not believers in MTA, but I don't mind last click as a data point in and of itself. So what we do within our application is we join the survey response with the last click response. So we ignore the nonlinear path that we know is very difficult to track and like highly inaccurate. We're replacing that with the customer's voice essentially, and then joining that with what the customer did immediately after they performed the conversion or bought something. And that is the story that we tell from a more bottoms up approach. So that's how we think about it. Like the de-siloing it, like nothing gets me more excited. Like we have Snowflake connectors and BigQuery. Like whenever we onboard a customer and they're like, I want your Snowflake connector, we're pretty jazzed that like, okay, our data is not just going to live in a silo. Hopefully we'll work with them to integrate it into kind of, whether it's different measurement methodologies or it's bottoms up data. So you can compare survey response data to what people purchased. Like there was obviously a lot of value in MTA when that was like the standard. We obviously now know that there's too many holes to rely on that, but the bottoms up approach does give you human level insight that can be combined easier.
Amazing. Yeah, we kind of like essentially call it like triangulation in our world. Essentially no methodology is perfect. Therefore, we'll take reads of multiple methodologies and see if something needs validation or if something validates the other methodology and so on, right? Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about the teams that manage these surveys, right? Not every brand has like a full-on research team. I'm sure Fairing kind of helps those brands through this process. But for those who want to essentially build this culture within the organization, how do you kind of upskill those marketing folks to essentially become survey literate, right? And also what keeps these folks continue that as like an always on ritual within their qualitative feedback constantly flowing, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of education for sure. Like there's this concept of a methodologist, which is a survey kind of writing expert. It is a very complex skill that I think a lot of people don't understand because there's just so many ways to introduce bias or
I definitely
analyze
don't understand it.
data the wrong way. Yeah, like we have one of our advisors was the former methodologist at Meta, kind of reporting up to Zuck, and like he thinks about this world so differently than everyone else we talk to. And it's just because he has so many reps throughout the years of like, how do we solve problems by asking intelligent questions? So it's definitely a ton of education. We put a lot of like, how do we run experiments to help educate our customers? A good example is a lot of our users ask us how many response options are too much. It's a little bit of a loaded question. If you're trying to extrapolate that data, we want less. We want around, call it 8 to 10. But if you're trying to optimize for response rate, which maybe you don't have to rely as much on an extrapolation to fill in kind of those holes, it actually doesn't matter. Like we worked with a massive $1 billion brand. We ran an experiment where we dropped their responses in their survey from 15 to 7, and the response rate did not change at all.
Okay.
So there's a lot of, I think the onus is on us to educate our customers into how do they think about this data, the accuracy of it. I will say the best customers that get us very excited are the ones who start asking questions.
Right.
And it's in the sense of like, if I word this differently, will I get a different output that'll help us solve X better?
Amazing. Or
should we introduce a different UX pattern here? And that's the stuff we're really focused on right now, is finding more of those customers who are eager to, I wouldn't say poke holes, but to ask the questions that will allow us at our scale now, which is like tens of millions of these a month, to answer them very quickly. But definitely, it's definitely a journey in the sense of we're investing way more into the education and shared benchmarks and analysis than we ever have, just because we've learned that it isn't as simple as maybe even we thought it was years ago when we started this. It's like, how do we get the most accurate data out of here? And we started building our data science team is about 18 months ago, and arguably should have done it like 3 years ago, just because there's such a treasure trove of insights across all of this aggregated data.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's an amazing thing to do, especially now, everyone's kind of relying on AI to kind of answer some questions or get some insights. And this is like you're hearing from the customer itself, right? So you got to know how to ask those right questions. So just on that note, essentially, the AI world is here, right? Autonomous agents, LLMs and whatever you want to call it, it's already made its way into the marketing world, especially in the creative world. On one side, I've seen like AI market research with like synthetic audiences
Yep.
in one type of solution. And then on the other side, I've also seen like AI powered survey platforms that automatically interview real people, like AI voice
Oh, yep.
interviews, right? What's your take? Where do you see this whole world going over the next 2 years?
Yeah, I don't have a direct answer. It's very hard to
Okay.
predict the future with that. I
Indeed.
think I met with the founder of a company called Rally this morning. He's a prompt engineer. I don't know if you know
Mike.
if you know him. Mike, yeah.
Yeah, I've had him
He's
on
in
actually. Yeah.
he's in New York. Yeah, I just had coffee with him, and
Yeah.
he's doing some incredible stuff with kind of synthetic audiences.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's still very early. The question that I was asking him, which they're working a ton on, is like how do these audiences change? Like how do you like retrain the audience for your persona? Like is it a series of improved prompts or is it more data? So I'm definitely very excited about that. I think
Yeah.
the use case that I spoke to Mike about was like there's an old Amazonian I don't know if, tactic, I guess, where they would like leave an empty chair for their customer in their meeting, so you never
Okay.
forget the customer. And I was like, what is the modern day version of that? Where like
Okay.
we're in linear, we're using our support. It's like, how do I have a customer at the table when we're like going through our normal process of building and solving
That's right.
solutions? And I was like, can you create synthetic customers that can sit in our linear account and provide comments? So I think I'm definitely more excited about that space on the kind of AI persona building front, more so
For
than the
sure.
other.
Amazing. Yeah. I think, that's a super exciting space to watch. At this point, I'd guess it's whatever the LLM is trained on. But then, consumer behavior changes so rapidly that I don't think it can keep up at this point. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. So yeah, awesome. That's amazing. Yeah.
It's
Sorry.
definitely, I just ended. It's definitely still early. We do, which you should come to the next one. Once a month, we do a coffee and commerce plus AI at our office. It's usually about 20 people. It's a mix of technology and marketers.
Okay.
And it's really just a roundtable where we just chat. I ask questions. I like prompt the group of like the question that you just asked. And what we're hearing a lot of is if you were to log on to X, let's say, you're going to feel like everyone's using AI in these more complicated ways, but like actually in their room when it's like, what are you actually doing? And everyone's just like, we've been trying a lot, but we haven't operationalized it yet. It's not providing us a ton of alpha outside of like writing emails and kind of using it as a replacement to Google search. Like,
Yeah.
So I think we're still, I don't know. The area I'm most excited about is AI creative.
Yes.
Especially in the TV space, just because the barrier to entry is so high that the democratization of TV can really start to open up to brands that are doing 1 million in revenue. And
Absolutely.
TV has so much inventory. It's so captivating. So I think it's probably the part I'm most excited about, where I can discover brands that I would want to buy from or associate with while I'm watching TV, not just when I'm on my phone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now that, majority of folks are on connected TV and, it's so easy to create these high production value TV commercials with AI.
Yeah.
It's wild. It's wild. It's going to be amazing. Awesome. So let's move on to what we call lightning round or rapid fire round. So quick one sentence answers. What's the KPI you check before coffee?
It's not, I wouldn't say it's a KPI. It's just a quick look at Slack right when I get up, just to understand what's happening within the business. So there's not really one thing. It's usually just to look at our support channel. It's probably the core thing I check of like, hey, is there customers who are kind of chiming in here?
Interesting. What's most overrated marketing or e-commerce metric?
Conversion rate, I think, is probably the most overrated right now. I think there's a lot of noise now if you're using any kind of click-based, if you're still operating in the GA4 post-hog world, just because bots, like everything can really throw this number out. I will say on the channel level, when we think about click-based, the most underrated metric is bounce rate, which I think is still so insanely informative for like quality of audience that you're driving to the site prior to any conversion event.
Amazing. What's an AI tool that you've been geeking out over, like we've been obsessed with over the past quarter?
I've definitely just been trying like Replit, Bolt, Lovable, like all of the application builders, just trying to get an understanding and a feel there. So those are probably the things I've been geeking out. But I think like everyone else, like very active user of ChatGPT and Claude. I kind of just have them both open and I just jump back and forth between them for no reason. I am using Perplexity more, which I'm liking. I do have Perplexity Comet, which is their browser.
Wow, you've got access. Nice.
Which I haven't.
Still waiting for my invite.
Yeah, I have it open here, but I haven't like transitioned over yet. Right. So we'll see what happens with Chrome from an antitrust perspective. I'm just like, what is the workflow of the knowledge worker going to be in like a year from now? And is it still going to be opening up the ChatGPT desktop app? I don't know.
Indeed. Are you a technical person by any chance?
Like a year of code camp, 12 years ago, but not a trained like in CS or anything.
Right. Amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. I'm a product designer by trade, so it's like opening up so much possibilities when it comes to like Lovable and stuff like that. It's pretty wild. What's a marketing myth that you like to bury forever? The marketing myth to bury, I don't know. I could just take the easy way out here. And is it a marketing myth that I want to bury? Yeah. Yeah, I think I would say that the MTA still has, or just click-based data, as much as I wouldn't rely on it for media allocation, it's still very valuable to understand consumer behavior kind of at the action level. I kind of alluded to it before. Like MTA is like click-based data is the best way to get signal for like a meta creative. That's right. If we look at bounce rate, we look at some of this activity, we look at what pages people are landing on. So I still think there's a world for it. I think what's happened in the space is like GA4 kind of overcomplicated something that needed to actually be winnowed down. So it's becoming less reliable. But I do think like we know teams that use fairing data and some click data, and they are like 9-figure brands. And that's like their methodology. They'll do holdouts every once in a while, but they're able to scale just with a more simplified view of the world. 100%. I've seen a lot of those. And what's a final quick win advice for brands who are not yet using surveys? Yeah, if you're not like the quickest win is obviously just deploying an attribution survey through fairing. We've made it so simple to get live. Like our core focus last quarter was implementation. So even if you're not on Shopify, you can get live with fairing in an hour or two. And the instant value that fairing provides, I think people underestimate, because click-based data and even quantitative in the sense of first-party data is pretty hard to interpret. Like it's like, what does 10-page views mean? You start asking your customers questions at scale and you like immediately have this visceral connection that is less of an inference and more of them telling you something that either it's the channel they heard or if you're using fairing for a different use case. So that's like the first quick win would obviously just be to start thinking about how do we get more customer data in a streamlined way. And that's the transition that brands need to make from I do a quarterly survey that turns into a PDF to like, what is a more always on way to get this level of data? That's right. Amazing. That's great advice. Highly recommended. So that's a wrap for this edition of the Full Funnel Podcast. Matt, thank you so much for showing us how surveys can help you get the answers you need to make better decisions. And to everyone listening, if today's conversation sparked any idea, hit follow and subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and share this with a teammate who might find it useful. But don't forget to follow Matt as well. He shares a lot of great insights on his social media, which I'll link down below in the description. And we'll be back next week with another guest pushing the boundaries of AI-driven growth. Until then, keep testing, keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next Full Funnel. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. Had a ton of fun. Awesome. Cheers.